what does it even mean to be an artist? Does it mean you're making work that you personally like to make? Does that make it art? Does it mean someone else considers you to be whatever their definition of artist is? Does it have to be non-functional work, or can it be functional? Does it mean you're only making work and you don't do anything else, especially anything else to pay the bills? Or can you be an artist and do something else? Does your art need to be your whole life? Or does doing something else actually better allow you to be an artist? Ultimately, how do we become artists? Frankly, I have no idea. But on today's episode, I virtually sit down with Isaac Scott, one of NCECA's 2024 Emerging Artists, to discuss his own journey in becoming, you guessed it, an artist. From originally even discovering clay, making production work, transitioning to fine art, blending different mediums together to find his voice, and continuing to figure out how to keep showing up. Because, spoiler alert, perhaps the answer to all of these questions is found simply, or not so simply, in figuring out a way to keep showing up. And we're going to get right into all of it right after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of The Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray Epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray Epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to The Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Kara. Hey, Isaac. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
This feels very long overdue because since NCECA of last year, not this year, NCECA of last year, I was in a room that you were leading a group conversation on like building community around NCECA. I think you had did you have QR code? Because I don't think I took a card. I had like all your details open in a tab on my phone.
Yeah, that's right.
For a year. I had that, like, it's in one of those tabs that your phone eventually puts. It's an open tab, but, you know, it was up there as a reminder every time I open Safari on my phone. Well, before I get ahead of myself and before we go down like a deep dive of NCECA or whatever, who knows, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Isaac Scott. I am an artist living in Philadelphia. I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin, and mostly do work around ceramic sculpture and photography. I do other things, but those are kind of the main things I do. And I spend a lot of time taking in, my environment, whether it's the physical landscape or cultural landscape, and kind of reinterpret that environment into whatever story I want to tell, or talking about some experience that I've had, or talking about the places that I'm in. So that's mostly kind of like a snapshot of what I do.
I am going to admit to my fangirling right now, get it out of the way, because in preparation for us sitting down and having this conversation, I was feeling woefully underskilled to interview you, because I'm like, you have such, I don't know. I was just like, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth at some point in this conversation, because I just feel like you have so much going on and such deep thought in the work that you're doing that I was just like, I am not a good enough interviewer for this, but I'm really glad you said yes.
I appreciate that.
I'm just going to own up to it right away because actually it wasn't till this last NCECA, and for people who don't know, you were an emerging artist this past March, or I guess it's like a whole year long group of cohort. And I didn't realize I know your photography. Like you've been published in reputable news, national news, and those images
Mhm.
came up and I went, holy shit, like, hold on, I know that image. Like, I know that breakdancer. I know that shadow. I know that composition. And all along, I was like, I had no idea it was the same Isaac Scott.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Well, before we get into that merging of mediums and all of that type of stuff, however you want to take it in terms of like how you wound up here. And I mean, I know you from NCECA, so I keep defaulting to that. But in clay, like, how did all this get started?
Me just like working in clay.
You were born on a bright, sunny day. I don't know how far back it goes, actually. Like, was it like, hey, you got involved as a kid and you knew this was what you always wanted to do, or more recent than that?
I never really kind of like growing up considered myself an artist. I didn't really, I don't think I saw myself as like even like that creative per se. But when I was in sixth grade, I was taking an art class and I believe it was Miss Mathis in Hamilton Middle School in Madison, Wisconsin. And we had like one section that we got to throw like one thing on the wheel. And like my middle school had wheels, which was like crazy.
Yeah. Also in Wisconsin. So, like,
Yeah. It was like I think it was like one wheel. So like we each kid got a few minutes to make like one thing on it. And I made a bowl and I was like so hyped about doing it. I just wanted to do it again. But I didn't really have any chances to do that until I was in high school. So I kind of got to take an elective my junior year and of high school, and I had remembered how much I wanted to do. I wanted to do something in art, but I was like, I suck at art. So like, what could what's a good like intro thing for me? And I just remember making that one bowl on the wheel. I was like, that was the most fun I had in that art class. So I should try doing that. Yeah. So I started doing ceramics, and I kind of just like fell in love with it. And I was doing it basically every chance I got. Was like throwing pots on the wheel. We even like started kind of like a pottery Olympics thing where it was like a throw off competition that me and my friends and my teacher like kind of made, and we made like posters and all this kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun.
that's awesome.
But yeah, that was like my intro into ceramic. And what's really crazy is like where I went to high school, West High School in Madison, Wisconsin, has like an incredible ceramics program and has actually a lot of people I went to high school, like not to say a lot, but like considering it was like it's a high school program, there's a lot of people I know end up going on and like either still do ceramics or they do it professionally or they're even like doing really well for themselves in ceramics. So it's like the program that's produced a lot of ceramic artists for sure.
Do you feel like there was something about that program in particular that they like showed? I guess what I'm getting at is I'm forever realizing that as kids, what we see, just around us as examples, realizing, oh, this is possible or oh, this isn't possible because you don't see anybody doing the thing. Like, do you feel like there was
Yeah.
something about that program that gave so many people, the space, the example? I don't know what it is.
Well, there's a few things. For one, I had an incredible teacher, Phil Lyons, who's retired now. And he had an incredible teacher, Don Hunt, who was also a big person that was in the ceramics community in Wisconsin. So there's kind of like that lineage there where it's a program that's kind of like been good for a long time. And Phil is incredible ceramic artist himself. So watching him do demos and watching him throw on the wheel, it was like magic, and like, everybody knows that feeling when they see someone effortlessly throw a giant vase in front of them in a few seconds. And you're like, holy, like, how did you do that? And so that was the kind of feeling that I was like, man, I want to be able to do that because it was just like magic at the time. I think one thing that kind of inspired me to do it, and there was also just like a social aspect to it because the ceramic, like our ceramics studio is kind of like a place where people would like hang out. So some people might be like cutting class, or they might be like, coming down from study hall and like sneaking into the room and just like hanging out with like their friends who are taking the class that hour or something. For better or worse, it would kind of allow a lot of things to go on in the ceramic studio as long as we were like working on something. As long as we had like our hands in the clay and like working on something, he wasn't too worried about, what was going on. Even to the point where like I just didn't do a lot of the projects that I was supposed to do because I only wanted to throw on the wheel and I didn't want to do hand building. And so he just let me do that as long as I kept on making pots. And that's what I wanted to do. And I was really hyped and excited about that. So that's what I think, that freedom to just like create, and he recognized that I was going to work hard as long as I got to do what I wanted to do. Yeah, I think that's what really kind of like set me on the track of falling in love with clay for sure.
Was he also then like making and showing his own work? Since you said he was like a practicing artist, right?
So like there was like times like I remember my first NCECA, like he showed work. He had a show. I don't even know where the show was at, but it was like he had a show with like some other local, like Wisconsin people when NCECA was in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first NCECA. And like he would show work a lot in the gallery at the high school and stuff, but like he wasn't like showing like a lot. I don't know why. I always thought like even today I'm like I've seen a lot of stuff now, and I'm like I don't know why he didn't show. I think he's just more into music, to be honest.
All right.
He like is retired now and he plays in a band and stuff. So
because he
I
was
don't know.
real tired by the end of the school year to put any. Look, if I'm teaching full time in a high school, I don't think my idea of a good summer is to go man a booth outside for 12 hours every weekend.
Exactly.
So what we're saying is Phil's a smart man, is what I'm.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
And he even told me, because I remember like being in college and coming back to the studio, and because he would let me use the studio during the summer, and he would even let me like borrow wheels and stuff. I remember coming back and like telling him like I think I want to like do ceramic, like really do it. And he's like, it's a tough life. He kind of warned me, you should maybe just be a teacher like me or something. Like I don't know if you really want to do that. I'm like, I think I want to do it. So, but he's always been like super supportive, and he came out to when I had my thesis show when I graduated from College School of Art and Architecture in Philadelphia. Like he came out to see the show.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it was really cool. So he's always been very supportive.
So you knew from high school that you were like, I'm going to higher ed, I'm going to college for ceramics. This is the path.
Oh, no. I started off being like, this is fun to make cups and pots and stuff, but I'm still didn't consider myself an artist. I still didn't consider myself like an artist at all. I was just someone who liked to make pots. So when I was in college though, I kind of, by the end, like I started doing like engineering. That did not work out. And then I like finished my degree in philosophy at the University of Wisconsin. All the ceramics I was doing was kind of outside of school at a Midwest clay studio in Madison, on the east side of Madison. So I was like going there I would like work there for free so I could have a shelf and make the things that I wanted to make and fire things for free. And that was outside of school. So I was just kind of still just like making pots and stuff. And then like through that time, I started to realize, oh, I really want to this is what I actually want to do for like a living, because I was getting to the end of undergrad and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, the only thing I can still see myself doing 30 years from now is making pots or like working with clay somehow or doing art. So I figured that I should kind of start getting more serious about what I was making and start really saying something with the work that I was making instead of just making pots and dipping them into a glaze. So that was kind of like the transition to kind of taking it more serious and kind of starting to consider myself an artist, even though I feel like it took me a while to really even say I'm an artist. I think it takes a while to convince yourself that that's what you really are.
I think it, at least for me, and the conversation Francesco and I have a lot, is that it's kind of one of those monikers that has to come from other people. Like this is going to be a hot take. People are going to maybe feel strongly about what I'm about to say, but it's one of those things where like, I don't know that we can say, oh, what I made is art. But if people outside of us look at it and call it that, and I'm not saying in like the way that it has to be socially acceptable or whatever, like, oh, making things other people are going to like, not like that. It's not about if somebody likes it or not, but it's more for me, if it says something, if it makes people think, even whether or not it speaks to a current cultural moment or there's something else to it that speaks to a larger experience of humankind, I guess is what I'm getting at, is when somebody else calls it art, it's somehow connected to like, it's striking a chord with humans on a deeper, larger scale that I don't know that individually, because we made it, we can say whether or not it resonates at that level, I guess is what I'm not explaining this really well. We should get Francesco in here. He's got a much clearer definition.
I think that definitely is part of it, but I think there is an aspect of it that you have to like fake it till you make it type of thing. And I think there's work you have to do to like convince yourself. I think to a certain extent, you have to believe it before other people buy into it. At least take yourself serious to a certain extent that people have to be like, oh, okay. They might still think it's bad, but they're like, oh, but you're serious about it. Okay.
But it's art.
Okay.
You can have bad art. I actually really love the way you just rephrased. You said fake it till you make it. And I feel like that phrase sometimes gets used in weird ways. But then you said you have to believe it before other people believe it. And I actually think that's like a beautiful reframe of the concept of fake it till you make it, right? Because sometimes people are faking it in just like a not, like you're not actually qualified to teach that subject. Please don't fake that. Like
they might still be faking it.
Right, exactly. They've made it, but they're still faking it. But like that idea that we kind of have to allow ourselves to believe in ourselves regardless of the response for a period of time, to just keep going, I guess, is what I hear in that.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're always waiting for someone to validate you or get some kind of recognition or get into the school that you wanted to then consider yourself an artist, it's like, I feel like you might be waiting for a long time. Sometimes just that you got to take that step to like naively just walk into being like, I am an artist. I'm not really exactly sure what all comes with that, but like just right now, I'm very confident that's what I want to do and that's who I am, and I have to like hold on to that for dear life because so many people are going to tell me, "Are you sure? I don't know if you want to do that. I don't think you should keep making that work. Oh, like I don't know." And then you have to like through all of that, whether it's like well-intentioned criticism or not, you have to be able to walk through all of that and like still try to figure out a way to hold on to that. If that's really what you want to do. And sometimes you might find out, I don't really want to do this, and that's cool too.
Yep.
But yeah.
Well, and also the reality, and people have heard me talk about this ad nauseum at this point, but the reality of like you might still want to do it, but maybe you don't feel like you can do it in a way that's connected to your financial stability, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
doing it as a job and doing it as a purely creative pursuit, philosophical concept are two radically different realities, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not easy. And very few people can just like completely support themselves purely off of the art that they make. And a lot of times people have to make like drastic compromises on what kind of work they're making in order to do that. A few people that could like make the work exactly the work they want to make, maintain the artistic integrity, and completely live off of selling that work, showing that work, or whatever, however they make money off of it. It's like it's crazy. It's crazy difficult.
It's interesting because I get into this conversation a lot, right? Because everyone knows I talk about sales and marketing. And when people talk about, like, to me, someone, for example, that the maybe kind of common example is a person who teaches the art, that the medium that they work in, and also works in that medium and sells that work. To me, that's the same as the person who also maybe has a line of work that sells incredibly well and they kind of can make it with their eyes closed, or maybe they have an assistant who helps make it or whatever. The default term that people think of is sellout, but I don't like that because it's so negative. To me, those same things are like some people have a passion for teaching and they want to do that regardless. I'm finding I really enjoy it. Other people do it because it's the stable job that provides healthcare, that gives a certain dollar amount in their pocket every 2 weeks and enough freedom to make the work that they want to make, which is also great. And there's no judgment on either end of the spectrum here, but I just think that's the same reason as the person who maybe can whip out a wholesale order of tiles or cups or, I know Lucy Fagello, and she was on the podcast here, and I don't remember which episode, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the link. She talks about the fact that she has 2 different businesses. She makes urns, and she has like a website that's just urn making that is kind of like this. It's not wholesale, but she's almost got it down to that kind of a process. And then she has her like artistic pursuits and her atmospheric firing and all of this type of stuff going on over here. And the urn business provides her the stability of those creative pursuits. And I feel like those to me are the same as the person who works part-time delivering for Amazon or, teaches at a school and then works during the summer or all these other things. But I'm rambling for way too long now. The point being, I feel like in the industry, there's things that are seen as like acceptable routes of having alternative income. And then there's things that are like, oh, well, you just make that because it sells. And it's like, well, how is that any different than like having a day job?
Yeah, totally.
That was the point I was
I
trying to get to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. We see different ways that people can make it, and teaching is one of those ways. And just having a regular job, whatever that is one of those ways. And yeah, I try to like take that into account of just like, however people are getting it done. It's like that's cool. They can, as long as you're not like hurting anybody or like whatever, trying to take advantage of people, then fine.
Totally.
You know.
Well, let's get a little into the nuts and bolts of life for you now, because one thing I'm amazed by when I see people putting on solo shows, having partnerships with galleries and all of this, I'm like, how does it work? Because it seems like the gold standard of what we all go after, like having representation from a gallery is like, that's the dream. That's the marker of success, if you will. I'm using air quotes for the people who can't see me. And at the same time, I'm like, how does that work? Because it's just so much different than what I know of, like making kind of, for lack of a better phrase, commercially viable work. I don't know if that's the right way to frame it, but there's making mugs over and over and again and selling hundreds of them. And then there's capital A art, fine art in a gallery that says something on a deeper level than, no hate to the mugs, we make them, but we're not making a social commentary about incredibly important subjects because somebody bought a 24-ounce mug.
I mean, some people make mugs that do.
That's true. Ours doesn't.
But yeah, I'd say working with galleries I think can be complicated. It can be like a very esoteric process on like how to like get in or where to even begin with that. And I guess my biggest thing would like recommend to people just like make better work. Just keep on making good work that you believe in, make it better, and be ready for when that opportunity comes around. A big thing is not necessarily like getting that chance, but then like doing well with that chance that you get, because you don't know how many of those chances you're going to get. So I would say just like keep on getting better and better. If you're an undergrad right now and you're trying to figure out like your work and you're like, oh my God, how could I get into a gallery and stuff like that? I wouldn't necessarily worry about it yet. Even if you're making good work right now, I would say just keep on making even better work and just like try to put on a show by yourself. Just try to figure out how hard that actually really is to do, because it's not easy. Trying to find like maybe like a maker's like an artist's run gallery in town and put on a show there with you and your friends and just see how many people you can get to come. And like I think just being involved in like making yourself present, making yourself involved in the industry and keep showing up, building. Like unfortunately a lot of everything just revolves around relationships that you have, especially in the art industry. So you can get recognized. You could put on a show with you and your friends, get a bunch of people to show up. If you advertise it right, the right people might show up and they'd be like, oh, you'd be great. Would you want to like curate a show at my gallery, or would you want to put a few of these pieces that I see right here into a group show that we have coming up? And then that could be your shot, So it's like, I think just you have to like keep on showing up to events around the city, go to things like NCECA, try to just make yourself as involved as possible. And I think things will just start happening. And I've seen it, and it's not something where you have to like go out and like, I'm going to network this event and I have to meet this person, this person, and this person so I can get into this specific gallery. It's like, I think if you move that way, people definitely move that way. I've seen it, and they do well moving that way. And so if that's how you want to move your entire career, that's fine. You network yourself through, or you can just, really, I think there's a more organic approach sometimes where not everybody like don't even feel comfortable moving that way in like a crowded room with a bunch of fancy people, just being like, oh, I'm gonna like talk to everybody and network my way through this room. A lot of artists are introverted if they don't want to move that way. It's very weird. But I think if you just keep on like showing up, just make organic relationships with the people around you, and just keep on doing stuff, keep on adding stuff to that resume, keep on like just stay active. And I think in doing that, which is hard enough to do on its own, it's hard enough to like have a job if you have a social life if you are in some kind of relationship, you got to find a way to pay the bills and rent and all that stuff. And then you have to make work and then show it somewhere. That's a lot. That's a
Take
lot.
care of your body, maybe.
Your body and mental and like all that stuff. That's so much. That's a lot to do. And then you have to do that and continue to do that until you get a shot at something bigger. And that may never happen. So it's like, are you willing to do that?
Yes.
And so it's like, yeah.
And I would even add, continue to do that in like a positive way, right? Because nobody wants to form a friendship with the person who shows up to the gallery show like cranky and feeling obligated, like I need to be here, or my work is better than this work. Why are they getting the recognition? We all know somebody who's not putting out great vibes. And sometimes you're just having a bad day, or sometimes you're having a bad 5 years and you're tired of putting in the work of everything you just said, of showing up, of adulting, right?
You can build resentment doing that too. You get super jaded on everything. If you see yourself putting in a lot of work and then you see someone pop up out of nowhere, they're just like doing really well, and you feel like, why is this person? And it's just because they probably know they were in the right room at the right time. They saw the right person. That person saw their Instagram. Now all of a sudden they're in a big show. I mean, it happens that it can happen like that. But it's like, if you're watching people around you and just, I don't know, I feel like you can get jaded. You can get, it can be like very like negative energy around that. So,
I will put myself up for example. I mean, that 100% happened to me in event photography, because my social network, my familiar network, my family, where I came from and all of this type of stuff was completely outside of the social network I was trying to get jobs in. And I kept seeing these people from we're just going to be blunt about it, affluent, suburban, urban neighborhoods whose like high school best friend was having a $1 million wedding, and they did and that was the first gig they ever got. And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, what? And it's just because they knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's so frustrating when you're on the outside of that circle.
Totally. And that's it's like, it's so much about connections. And there's some people that they grow up with connections. And there's nothing you can do about that. The only thing you can do is just keep making better work and finding ways to enjoy that and, take care of yourself and keep going with it. It's like, and then eventually, I do believe eventually, like the next step, whatever that next step up is going to come. So just maintaining until you're like prepared for that moment when it hit. Some people get famous super old, and that's just like what it is. Like Morgan Freeman, like he didn't get a big role until he was like 50 or something. I don't know.
And then he literally played God. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. Now he's worth however many hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. So it's just like,
and is an icon to me. You know what I mean? I don't think people I don't think we are often reminded of when that success hits, right? Because in our brain, in my conscious lifetime, it's like, yeah, Morgan Freeman, duh. Yeah. But like, no, he was sitting around showing up doing the work that we're talking about for how many decades before he became the duh.
Watching all the young people just like zip past him, come and go. So it's like you probably seen everything there was to see by the time he actually made it big and got that big role.
I actually see this happen a lot now. I think it's like with anything, there's two sides, right? There's pros and cons, but I'd love to hear your take on it, because I feel like there's opportunity with the way technology works now to break down that kind of incestuous connections cycle, in terms of you have to know somebody who knows somebody, because with social media, we can kind of like pop in and out of these circles a little bit easier. We can get in front of people we wouldn't otherwise get in front of, even just from a worldwide geographical nature of it, which is the plus side. On the downside, you also have a lot of, I'm going to throw us newbies under the bus here. You've got a lot of people new to a craft who are passionate about it and are excited about it, but maybe, myself included, need to put a few more hours at the wheel in before we're actually making categorically good work. But are good at are comfortable even with social media, not even good, but just comfortable. And this is like, I think of projects like OSA's doing with David McDonald, and like there being these master crafts people who aren't getting nearly as many eyeballs on their work, but a 20, 30 something year old kid can come along and be like, I know how to take video, and all of a sudden, you know, be selling out constantly because they have a huge following, right?
They just look good with their shirt off, and they can just sit there and make bad pops and be like, and people are like.
Yes. Like the right, you know, I've never thrown, I always wear an apron. And it's like, if I just threw in a V-neck, I don't know, maybe I'd be more popular.
They get more views. Who knows? I mean, and the people hate on that on Instagram, and it's like, I don't hate on that. That person's just trying to make it too. I have an Instagram, and I used to go harder with trying to, like, you know, put up a video more consistently and like trying to get more followers and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, that is exhausting. And it's also like kind of like a full-time job in itself. And I know because I have friends who are doing extremely well on Instagram, and they have told me how much it has like cost them. They're doing really well with their business. It's fortunately translated into doing well for their business, which it doesn't always do. People misconstrue that. Followers doesn't mean those followers are going to buy anything. But you know, it's like they've had to like take breaks. It's like it takes a toll on your mental health. You're constantly updating. You're constantly trying to adjust to how the algorithm is changing and evolving. And it's like, oh, hashtags aren't what they used to be, and like all these different things. And it's like, you get two people in a room that like spend all day on Instagram together, and they're talking about it, and you're like, I'm so happy I'm not super invested in my Instagram like I used to be. But it's a great tool. I would also say this at the same time, it is an incredible tool, and I've gotten so many opportunities from putting stuff on Instagram. And I think it's, if nothing else, it's a great like tool to just like, if you don't have a website or something like that, it's just a great place to put your work up and get as many eyeballs on it as possible. So yeah, I think there's just like this weird thing where people are like, oh, that their work isn't that good, but they're getting all these followers. That's so lame. And it's like, maybe you need to learn how to make better videos. I don't know. Maybe you need to like learn how to edit or something. Like, I don't know. Either that or like, because that person's spending a lot of time. Even that video might seem corny, or like those pots don't seem that great. I don't know. It's like, well, someone has to make an equally as good produced video with better work than. I don't know. That's work in itself. That's a skill in itself to like market yourself like that.
I agree completely. And I also think it's a learnable skill, right? A lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't know how to do, you know, I'm an introvert, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And it's like, well, it's a learnable skill. I didn't know how to do this 14 years ago either. And then I had to figure it out, you know? It's one of those things too, I think, like when it's a point of contention in this household. I'm not going to lie. Because Francesca just wants to make the work. And I'm like, I agree philosophically, but we have to tell people the work exists in order to buy the dog food for the dog that we have. You know, like you have to, the world has to know the work exists. So you have to pick your way that you want to tell the world that the work exists, right?
That's a huge thing. It's like, have different ways people can access your work quickly. Because it's like, if you are at a show, or you're putting on a show, or you're in a show, and someone's like, oh, hey, oh, you do art? Oh, this is your work? Oh, can I see more of it? You need to be able to pull that up in like 2 seconds. You don't want to be scrolling through your phone looking for photos of work that you've done. You want to like just be able to like, boom, here's 10 pieces of mine, you know?
Yep.
So
here's how you can contact me. Here's how you can see more.
So it's like, I think part of like taking your own work seriously is just like, you make the things and then you document them really well. You can make something that's like, okay, look really good the way you document it. And
been there, done that, guilty.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you take that and you just have it readily available to look at if people want to see it. And I mean, that's part of it. And then you just keep on improving from there. But like, until you make those first steps, don't wait till you're really, really good at something to then ask for people to take you seriously. Like, take yourself seriously, make the work that you're making, document it well, take that seriously, and then present it in a serious way. And then just make better work when you go back to the studio. But get better at all those things at the same time. And, you know, eventually, especially with the access to like things like the internet and social media, it's like people are going to see it. And when you make good enough work, or work that connects to enough people, someone's going to take it seriously and be like, oh, can you, like, we want you to bring that here to us. And, or maybe I want to pay you for it, like something.
Do you feel like you've had that? The only phrase coming to mind is tipping point, but I feel like we're both. I know that I'm fairly confident I'm older than you are, but we're both too young to say tipping point as a career as a whole. So it's not the right phrase. But do you feel like you've had like a moment or a couple moments where it's like you were doing the work, you were showing up, you were being, you were, all of this, the things we've been talking about in terms of like making better work, showing up, meeting people, telling the world the work exists over and over. And then you like, people can't see me. I'm like expressing the word I can't think of, like this, I don't know, a light bulb came on with the community around you and you've gotten some traction now. Because from the outside looking in, I'm like, you're crushing it over here. You're making impactful work. You're doing things in multiple mediums. You're saying something with the work that you're producing that strikes a chord and also can be understood. Like for me, I consider my own personal definition of good art is when you can like look at something and feel something right away. Good, bad, ugly, beautiful, whatever you want to call it. But it strikes a chord. And then when you learn more about it, it's even better. And I distinguish that away from like, I have to read the placard in the museum to understand why this is important, So from the outside looking in, I'm like, dang, you've just been on this trajectory. But I don't know if it feels that way for you.
I mean, sometimes it does. And sometimes it feels like, I feel like I have to sometimes like grapple with the feeling of how well I am doing in art. Because I mean, it's a goal for so long. And then it's been like, I've had these really high highs and these really low lows. And then it's just like kind of realizing that regardless of how I'm being perceived in that moment or how I perceive this moment going, I just have to, again, just keep on showing up and keep on making work, and like the next thing will come. There's never that guarantee. That's another thing. People might perceive me in a certain way, but that same way that people are like waiting for that first gallery that first thing to come to them, I feel like I'm still trying to maintain until that next thing comes too. Maybe I'm not explaining it that in the right way, but like I think that feeling of like, when is that next thing going to come? I feel like that feeling never really goes away. And you really just have to, it's a continuous lifetime process of just continuing to show up, continuing to make the work, and continuing to grow in whatever direction that is. I think that just never stops. If you're not doing that before you get that opportunity, it's like how you maintain that relevance or whatever. I mean, it's not going to happen. So you just have to start doing it and then keep doing it, and then being okay with just like whatever comes after that, good or bad, keep doing it.
This is like the Buddhism of art. I think that's the title right there. The Buddhism of art, or like the yogi of art or something. Because I feel like it sounds so much like when I hear people talk about like a practice, right? Like people use the word practice a lot with yoga or meditation or something like that, where it's like you just keep showing up. And even, I mean, I guess you could think of practice in a more less woo sense in terms of like an athlete or a musician or anything. You can win the Super Bowl and you're still going to show up to train. I was going to say spring training, but then I'm mixing my sports. I don't know why I picked the Super Bowl. I don't watch football. Baseball was a much better route for me to go here. Athletes in the off season don't all of a sudden just like sit on the couch for 6 months or however long it is and then get back up and like, actually, here's a better athletic analogy, because the Olympics are this summer, right? You think about Olympians, they're competing before the every 4 years thing, but they're also practicing way more than they're competing. And then in terms of the Olympics, sometimes people get like a shot until they're too old for their sport, or maybe twice. I mean, how many people have gone to the Olympics more than 3 times? Right?
Yeah.
Over the course of whatever. I guess there's probably some sports, but I'm going to stop trying to make a metaphor for sports. This is working. This is going very poorly. Hopefully that made sense. So you mentioned going to undergrad in Wisconsin, but then I also know you just said your thesis show in Philly. So did you go on to do like a master's program in ceramics then, or kind of walk us through, because I guess where I'm curious is like if you always knew you were going to make work that effectively is going to live in a gallery, is going to be sold in that kind of quote unquote fine art way, or if that just kind of accidentally happened based on the things that you were interested in creating. Because you mentioned earlier the difference between shifting from like making pots on the side in college to like, I want to do this and I want to explore what I want to say with it. And that to me was like a powerful thing.
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad, I started like my older work is all pottery, and I was really starting to put like imagery on my work, and I was using kind of like my own image as well as pop icons or like black icons that I looked up to, or something I kind of want to like tell a story with through using a certain image. That was kind of like the first thing I like really started doing, because the ceramic world around me was very much centered around either like make pots and you just like dip it into a glaze and that's what it is, or it's like wood fire stuff and atmospheric stuff and stuff that I like a bunch of brown pots I didn't understand. I was like, why are people so hyped about these like gnarly looking brown pots? I was like, what am I missing? I don't get it. But I was like, I know what people like me would really want to see on pot. And so that's what I started doing. And I was like, I didn't really have like a deep sense or knowledge of art history. I just knew that this is like, I like making pots and this is what I want my work to say or to represent. And I wanted to make something like cool to people that were like young, like me, and something people were interested in. So especially like, like young Black kids in Madison. That's like my initial attempt at making art, or like that's what I considered art. I was like, now these aren't just pots. I'm trying to move these pots into like this category of art. I guess this is like how I was looking at it. And I kind of like saw ceramics as like kind of like my gateway into, I was like, I know I can do this well. Like there's like the one thing I can do well, and I'm going to use my skills with clay to kind of get myself into branch out into other mediums. It was kind of like, I was like, that's the way I want to be able to do this. So I started doing that, and that was good for a while, but I still felt I wasn't really like my work wasn't really being taken that seriously. It was what it was. I don't know. I still think the last stuff that I was making is still really cool, but that's what it is. And I ended up moving to like right after undergrad, I moving to Seattle, and I was just doing whatever I could to be in a studio. So I would like work as a tech at a high school for free, and did like a work study thing at Pottery Northwest. And so I was just kind of doing whatever I could to like get access to a studio, keep making these pots. But I kept on developing, and I kept on getting better at what the techniques I was using. I learned different ways to get images on pots. So like the whole time, no one really knew about me. No one really knew who I was. I knew I could make pots well, but then I was really trying to up my game at the different types of ways I can add imagery and color and different things like that to the surfaces of my pots to make them more interesting. Like, how could I get better at telling a story in these pots? And that was a process that was a struggle, and it took a long time. This is the time when I had a lot of things going on. I was like having this full-time job. I'd like work at this bar from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. and I'd wake up in the morning and I would have to like try to go make pots after that. And then I'm trying to maintain my relationship or like have friends or like whatever. And it's just like, it was just a lot. So it was like a slow process. It wasn't like I was grinding out 100 pots a day and like, oh my God, I'm like doing all this kind of stuff. It was just like all my free time that I could, I would devote to that. And so it was a lot of sacrifice and a lot of different ways in my life to like try to maintain doing this and like put my work into shows or try to sell it online and stuff. So that's what that was. And eventually I met Roberto Luco and NCECA in Kansas City. And that was like a big like moment for me because I was a fan of his, and I kind of ran up to him, and he was like talking to somebody. I think I might have interrupted them. I don't know. But like I ran up to him. I was like, hey, I'm Isaac Scott. You're Roberto Lugo. And like I'm so excited to meet.
It's the most NCECA meeting ever. Like
Totally. I had a backpack full of cups, like mugs that I had made, and my face on it, of course. And I was handing them out to people that like I either was inspired by or I just wanted them to have a cup of mine or something. And so I handed him a cup. I was like, yo, I made this. If you want it, like, you can have it, whatever. And because I was like, I don't even know if he's gonna even think it's good or would want it. But he like freaked out. He's like, oh my god, this is so cool. Thanks, man. And then he like pulled out like a little shot glass that he had drawn his face on with like overglaze, and
Yeah.
gave me that. And I was just like, oh my god, like this is crazy. I got a Roberto Lugo cup, just like that. That was like a really cool, crazy moment. And then he like invited me to a show that he was having, that like an opening that night. And then he was like, stay in touch, man. And so I stayed in touch, yada yada yada. Like we stayed in touch for like a while, and then he had became a professor at Tyler School of Art in Philly, and he hit me up and was just like, "Yo, like I just got this like job." Like he had been pressuring me to go to grad school, and I was just like, "No, I'm not going back to school." I was like, "I'm never going back to school." Like I somehow finished my undergrad degree. I don't know how I did that, and I never had like a good relationship with school, so I was like, "I'm never going back." And then he was like, "I just got this like my dream job at like Tyler School of Art, and like you should really consider applying to go to grad school." And that was a time when I was like, I didn't have access to like a gallery or anything. I was definitely at a low point. I had applied to some things and those fell through. And one thing I thought I was going to get kind of like fell through last second. And so I was at this kind of low point. I was like, man, like what the hell do I got to do to like make something work? And people kept telling me like, well, if you go to like grad school and get this degree, then you'll get into more things. And I'm like fuck that. Making better.
Why?
It's like in my mind, I was like, I'm making better work than like this guy over here. Why do I have to like go to get a degree, spend years of my life to get a degree just so I can get into things? Anyway, so that was like my viewpoint at the time. And so I was like, all right, whatever. Like I'm gonna apply to this thing. And there's a big part of it was like so I literally just wanted access to a studio for 2 years because I was having such a struggle to like work and try to like work at places to get access to a studio. That I was like, man, I just want to get like access to a studio for 2 years, and I guess I'll get this degree too.
And yeah, whatever. That's nice.
And I was like, I'll finally do this. And the big thing too is like, I had built a relationship with him. It was like, I at least trust him to help me through this process because I'd never been to art school before. I was like really intimidated by talking about art or learning about art history or like any of those things. And that was definitely a learning process. And so like I ended up, eventually getting into school, and I finished that degree, and it was a lot. It was a big like learning process through all that. But I think it helped me a lot to where I am now.
I was going to say, how long ago, when did you finish grad school?
It was like 2021.
I was going to be like, I'm about to feel real old as soon as you answer this question. All right. Got you. Oh, also, side note, grad school through COVID makes it slightly more difficult.
Yeah, that was rough.
In a medium, it's not like you were getting an economics degree where you're sitting at a computer the whole time, like in a medium where you have to physically be present to do the thing.
Right. Yeah. No, that was a lot. And I was like shocked at so many people who like got into school during COVID. I was like, man, it's like, we can't even get into our studios. Why are you here?
Why did you start paying tuition? Can't you defer those acceptances?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, but at the same time, I think it would probably have been like the easiest time to get into a lot of schools probably too. But I ended up deferring for a semester. They said that they might take away my funding because I had like a full ride at the time. So I was very fortunate to get. And they're like, well, you might lose your funding if you defer for a semester. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not coming. I'm not coming to school. I won't be there. And
either we can be on the same page about this, or
and it was just like, I think, it was one of those things like I knew why
I had signed up for grad school.
And the core for me was like, because I never saw myself as becoming a professor. So I was just like, I wanted access to a studio. You're not providing that to me right now. And that might not be in your control to provide that to me. I'm not going to be in my studio. So why am I going to school? That was me. Because I was like, I don't want to go through the motions and like sit on Zoom all day so I can like get this piece of paper earlier for what? I don't know. So for me, I was like, if y'all don't let me do this, I'm just going to keep doing my photos thing until I'm doing photography until I can.
I was just going to ask if that's when you got into. I need to back up and acknowledge and just say, for the record, as someone who now teaches photography, that your skill set with a camera, now that I'm learning that you're about to say, I think, that you got into the photography in 2020, that's just a God-given gift then, and I need all my photo students not to expect. Jesus! Where you're at 3 years later in documenting and capture and like seeing shadows and capturing moments for sure took me at least 5, not 3, if I'm being incredibly gracious with myself. Holy shit, man.
Yeah.
Damn. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was crazy.
All right. Okay.
So yeah, basically with the photography thing, I was taking a class in January of 2020 is when I was like started taking the class. It was my first photography class. I'd like used a camera to document work before, but I still didn't even know like ISO was or like aperture meant really. I just like kind of set it on auto and did my best with what I did, or I would like hire a friend or someone to like take photos for me.
Well, and documenting a still object is completely different than being surrounded by thousands of humans in a constantly moving environment. Like, what?
Oh, it's crazy. So I started taking that photography class, and it was a really good class because it was basically just like drilling the basics into you, like just learning how digital camera works and learning the basics of editing. So it was just taking a lot of photos and editing a lot. And so, but we only got like a month into the class or something, or like whatever it was, a month and a half into the class before we got shut down because of COVID. And so I lost access to the ceramic studio, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. So I would just go on walks, and I would take my camera with me. And I'd like try to go out every day, and I would just go out and like take just like pictures of the neighborhood, or go on like find some train tracks and just follow them and take photos of graffiti and stuff. So that's what basically I did to like stay sane during the pandemic for a while. And then, after George Floyd got murdered and the protests started happening, that I just brought my camera with me to the protests. And yeah, it was kind of just like this like crazy kind of thing where I had like, because I had kept going with it, was kind of doing it every day, I had enough skills to like do what I wanted as things were happening in that moment. So it was really kind of like this crazy right place, right time type of situation.
But also, I'm going to very briefly interrupt because this is also the exact thing you started part of this conversation out with in terms of like you kept showing up every day for yourself to get out of the house, to just practice with the camera, and which meant you were to a certain extent prepared when something way more impactful, no offense to birds in the park, but like something huge was happening in front of you, because it's insane to me to look at the images that you took and realize you had just started using a camera like 6 months before, something like that, like not a whole year. And to be able to not only capture, like, just to expose the image, to get a sharp image, to get something in focus and reasonably exposed in the sunlight with shadows and all of this type of stuff, but also then to get a feeling on top of that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but that's really fucking hard. And you did a really good job.
Yeah.
Because for me, at least, put in a position to document something, I also find that I wind up removing myself from what's happening. Right. And so like I'm separate from the events in front of me because there's this black box in front of my face. But I don't get that sense from your images. I get that sense of literally being there, being a part of it, and just happening to freeze that moment in time, as opposed to kind of your, I don't know, traditional photojournalist who's not talking to anyone next to them, not learning people's names. Like, that's why I could never do photojournalism, because it felt like you were taking from people rather than contributing.
Totally.
So.
Totally. And there's a lot of ethics around when you're participating. You move in a different way than a photojournalist would do, who is a third party and can take a photo and not worry about what the consequences of that photo might be. So, things happened, especially in the early weeks, where people were really scared that just by being at a protest, you would end up in jail or something, or maybe even something worse would happen to you. And so there was a lot of ethics around like taking photos of people's faces. And so I would really I would either just like not post those photos, or I would like really try to go out of my way to like take photos from the back of people. So I would be in the back of a protest like, and shoot them that way. Or a lot of people were wearing masks at the time. A lot of people were.
Yeah, my fear was going to a protest from an illness standpoint, right? It was like the first time in my life, because I participated in a bunch of in college, and you never thought about it being a problem that you were with a group of people. I mean, that was part of the power of it, was like to have your voice synced up with these other hundreds or thousands of people. And then all of a sudden I was in Chicago being like, do I go? How does this work? You know?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of like uncertainty about the virus still at that time as well. There was no vaccine, obviously. People were just kind of like, how can we do this? How do we do this safely? So everybody was like usually masked up, and it was outside. So that there was that. And yeah, it was an intense environment for a lot of different reasons. You're like, am I going to catch COVID doing this? Are the cops just going to like beat my ass? Like, am I going to end up in jail? Like, what is going to happen? Are some vigilantes going to come out of nowhere and start problems? So it was just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of like moving parts. But yeah, like being in the middle of that was a really crazy moment. And I knew that I would kind of recognize like this, because I saw what was going on across the country in the week leading up to the first protest. Because like we didn't have our first protest like a week after. So I had already seen like a week of protests like throughout the country. So I knew this was just like a big moment. And I kind of felt like this was going to be bigger than just a week of protests. Like I kind of felt like there's literally nothing else going on. People aren't going to work. There's nothing, like there's no new shows on TV, no sports are being played, no movies. What else is to do besides go out and like protest again? Or just sit inside, and watch it on TV happen. So it was just like, I felt like documenting what was about to happen was really important, and being a part of speaking out and demanding change was like kind of at the forefront of my mind at the time. And so I wanted to try to figure out a way to be a part of that and uplift the voices of like the people that were out there every day, who maybe outside of those photos wouldn't have another means of like getting their voices heard more broadly than that one moment. And I think I was thinking about how, as an artist, how can we use our skill sets to amplify that and to carry out those voices out into the future,
I mean, it's been, what's the word? I'm going to go with interesting to listen to responses of people when it comes to art, or even when it comes to like celebrities who get involved in social issues, or athletes for that matter. And like, but especially with art, there's a long-standing history. I guess the way, going back to what I said earlier in terms of like my personal definition of art being something that makes you feel something that makes you think, like there's a long-standing history that is what art does, right? Like it's meant to comment on society. It's meant to, it's the thing that can help change culture, which is such an amorphous, gloopy thing that we're all surrounded by. Even as far back, like if somebody wants to go as far as, I don't know, like the Renaissance, which would be like super entitled people paying artists to make work for them. It's like, yeah, well, the Catholic Church was still influencing culture by painting things on walls for people who weren't always literate to be like, oh, okay, this is how the earth was created. Sure. Like it's completely different subject, but that's still influencing society.
Absolutely. My computer about to run out. I have to go grab my charger real quick and plug it in.
Okay, get it.
Okay, now it's working.
Awesome. Well, it also gave me pause, like, as I'm rambling along, that number one, I'm out of my depth of things that I really know about and my own personal definition of art and all of this stuff. So, like, I'm just going to encourage everybody. I don't know if your NCECA presentation is online. Is it on? Because everything was recorded, right? Are all the emerging speeches
not
online?
Not yet. They're going to put those, like NCECA is going to officially put them out, I think, in October. But I have mine up on my Instagram, on my YouTube.
Okay, perfect. So I will get that link and I will share it, because that is a much better thought out presentation of this subject. So I'm just going to stay in my lane now and send everybody to you. But also it makes me realize that I've already taken up a lot of your time. So I should like try and land the plane probably at some point. Otherwise I'll just keep chatting. So pragmatically speaking, I've gone off onto the philosophical, but pragmatically for you now with life and making, what's it look like for you? What does, putting together shows and like just making a living from the things you make, like how does it work for you now?
I do teach in Philly. I teach at 2 different public studios. And so I teach 2 classes at each one of those places. And then I'm a studio assistant for Roberto Lugo. And then I also make my own work and have my own practice. So still, even now, still having a full-time job and then figure out, making my own work and promoting myself and like doing those types of things. But the cool thing though is that I used to have to like work in like I was saying like before, like bars, service industry. I was a line cook for a long time. I've worked in warehouses and stuff like that. So I'm just really happy that like every time I go to work now, regardless if it's for myself or someone else, like I'm always getting to touch clay. And I get to make something out of clay or teach people something about clay or be around other people and do clay all the time, every day. That is truly like a blessing for me. And it's a place that I'm really excited to be in. And that is, that's just like, for me, that's like a really big and an exciting place to be in. But I'm right now, I'm just about to move into like a new studio. And so I'm doing that with like a friend to be cool. And just gonna be making work and getting ready for things that are coming up in the future. Yeah, that's kind of like where my day-to-day is at right now.
I feel that like people couldn't see us smiling as you were talking about like working in clay every day. And I feel that in my core in the sense of like the amount of energy it takes to switch from one job to another when it is all within at least the same category or the same industry, like I imagine has to be an energy saver. Physically, mentally, all of it, just because otherwise it's like you're flipping your brain constantly to these other spaces that just, I think we forget how draining that kind of content switching can be.
Totally. That was always like a thing I had to think about before. I was like, I would come home exhausted after working in the kitchen for like 10 hours. And then like to like try to work up like enough energy to get up the next morning and go do something. Especially if you have to like put in 10 hours of work at that place to even hold on to your spot so I don't have to pay for that spot, which I otherwise could not afford. And then sometimes you just like don't even get taken seriously by the people who run that place. And you're like just trying to convince them. It's like, I'm trying to do whatever I can to like be here. And I don't know, people not hearing you. That it's just like there's so many different things. Like, and then that's the other thing. Again, that is going to happen. You're going to run into those obstacles where people don't take you seriously, and there's some people maybe in there close to you who are like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" You're going to get into grad school, and then your professors are going to tell you should stop making that work, and then you're going to have to like be depressed and be like, "No, I'm going to still make that work anyway." And then that work actually does really well. So those type of experiences have been like the most valuable. It's like those low points where you're confidence is shaken, but you still kind of find some truth in there that you can like be like, okay, maybe that's right, but like at the core of it, I know that I am on the right track and I know what I want from this work, even if it's not coming through right now, like I'm gonna get. And so having that confidence and being able to get through those moments where like people turn you down, everything you're applying to isn't working out, people fall through on their commitments to you, people aren't taking like whatever it is, like you got to be able to like, I'm still going to get up exhausted from my job last night and I'm going to go to the studio anyway and keep making that same work that these other people that so-called know anything don't believe it. And that's just like what it comes down to at the end of the day.
I also find I've had to at least remind myself that a lot of times the comments we're getting from other people are generally reflections of their own life experiences or their own fears, concerns, what have you, less than what it is about. There's no such thing as an unbiased critique, right? We're humans, we're biased. You can work really hard to be aware of that bias, but it's still going to be somewhere irking back there in the subconscious, I think, at least. But also just even I'm just thinking, I know how rough the service industry takes a physical toll on you. It takes a mental toll on you because like Oof, we'll talk about that another time over cocktails. But especially for what we're all trying to do, I think I'm not going to say we all, I underestimate the energy you need to be creative, like to be mentally interesting, to come up with new ideas or to fuse disparate things together and do what we're trying to do as creatives and as artists. And that takes even more energy. So to get as far as you have gotten amidst then also the demands of 10 hours on your feet in a kitchen or odd hours working in a bar. I mean, shit, I only survived being a barista for like 6 months because just having the opposite life schedule of all of your friends is incredibly difficult. I'm amazed by people, nurses that work third shift or anybody that works third shift. Shit, like that is hard.
It is hard. One of the things that I struggled with too was like at the time that all that was happening, I felt like anytime I was in the studio, it had to be like really good. And I didn't have any room to fail. And so that really also limits how creative and like out there and experimental you want to be. Because it's like I'm making a pot. That pot has to be good. The imagery that on has to be like so good and tight and it has to be exciting enough that people are going to look at it in a room full of other cups and like want that one. And I felt like I could not make a bad one. Kind of sometimes there was like this intensity of making like that was like, this has to be so tight and perfect and like good. And I didn't really feel like I had an opportunity to branch out or really try something else until I got into grad school. Because then I finally felt like I had space to where being like, whatever I'm making right now doesn't have to be like this big thing. It was like I finally gave myself permission to like experiment and like do weird stuff, which was like a huge thing for me because I stopped making pot. It's like, because I think I had built up this relationship with pots, at least when it was my work, that when I felt like it was my work, I was like, it had to be this thing and it had to be like, and I think I got tired of making like that. And I wanted the work that I made to feel, at least the creative process, to feel looser and to feel more organic and I could explore in my making process. And that was really hard to get to that point when, again, like, yeah, you're so much energy is going this way. I only have a certain amount to put it into this, and it has to be like good enough to get me to get into a show or be sold or like whatever. So yeah, sometimes it was like struggling to just straight enjoy it. And
there are so many other subjects I could dive into because now I'm thinking about like my experience of like American education system versus when I was in the UK and like the fact that I always felt like we had to have an answer, which is kind of akin to like having something that's you produce that's worthy or good or whatever. Now I've already mentioned all of these things, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I've already taken up an hour and a half of your time also.
But I wouldn't like, I guess just finish that thought. I stopped making pots for like my own work, but I love making pots when I'm like in a class setting where I'm teaching. And I'm like doing that. I'm making demo pieces and getting to sit around and just make pots that I don't have to worry about them being good. And I can just make whatever pots that I want while I'm teaching. Like, I love that. I love that kind of like casual, just making things. And I also make pots as part of like my being an artist assistant. So I still get to like see these objects kind of transform into these like works of art in the studio and go to all over the world and things like that. And so I'm like, I get to still do a thing that I love doing, but I don't have to have that same relationship with it that I had at the time that it was like my work and it had to be a certain way. Now that I've been able to put that down, I still get to like enjoy it in like a different setting. And I still get to like make the work that I want to make, which was exciting.
It's really interesting for me that you've been able to find that in the same medium. Because for me, that's actually how I got into clay. Again, like I had to produce for photography, right? I didn't feel like I could really take risks because generally people want to know that their wedding photos are going to turn out. Whereas clay was the space where I could show up and like, I didn't care if I ever fired anything to be finished or, it was just like the place to kind of screw around and enjoy myself and have that therapeutic experience we all talk about in terms of the clay spinning in our hands and everything. And then I married a production potter.
Yeah, I couldn't get away from it.
It's like that nasty, I don't know, it's like a little devil on my shoulder coming back to like, okay, produce. Like, I don't know. Well, that's That's a conversation with a therapist, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have you back if it's open and available. I would love to learn more about what it's like to be working in as assistant in an active studio too, because I feel like there's more people out there doing that than I realize, but I think of like I don't know, lack of a better phrase, the quote unquote glory days of your kind of craftsman master studio and all of these people, apprentices and things like that under it, that doesn't really exist in today's world. But maybe that shift into assistantship that you're experiencing, I think, is fascinating. But I should probably not keep you for 2 hours when I told you it was going to be an hour, out of due respect. Is there something, though, just to kind of big wrap up, is there something that we haven't talked about that you feel like people who are out there listening at a variety of stages of trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I make this work? How do I take enough time to make good work, but at the same time make a living? Like anything, just wherever you want to take it. I'm not formulating this question well whatsoever, but something we haven't talked about that you wish people knew, or that given the chance to tell people, you'd love for them to actually to know about this whole endeavor.
I'll just say, like, just for one, just like keep going. Even if it's just a little bit, even if you're like, oh man, I don't want to don't set the task too big. Don't be like, I have to go to the studio and make like 100 cups today, and I really don't want to do that in order to like reach the place that I want to get. It's like, just make like 5. I don't know. Just don't put too much pressure on yourself. Make the work that you want to make. Take yourself seriously and just keep showing up. Just keep showing up, and something will happen eventually. But yeah, be real. Oh, the last thing I want to say is just like be real with yourself and who you are. I'm a huge believer in like however you get success is how you're going to maintain it. And I've had that belief for like a really long time. Like I took this like class on like Gandhi in like college, and that was like one of his like big philosophies. It was like however they were going to like be able to get freedom from the British imperialism was like how they're going to be able to maintain it. If they did it through violence, then they're going to have to maintain their power through violence. And so he wanted to do it non-violently. So I was like, one of his like big philosophies. So and I feel like that's true in everything in life. So it's like the way you get whatever level of success that you feel is success, the way you get there is the way you're going to be able to like maintain that. So like be realistic with like what you're going to be able to maintain, and like again try to take care of yourself. And so that's something that I've had to like grapple with and try to like struggle with, and so I feel like just try to be real with yourself, take care of yourself, make work, keep showing up.
I love it. I meant to ask you more about the fact that you got an undergrad in philosophy, but you just brought it full circle right there for me. So we're just going to leave it at that. Oh, that makes so much sense. Awesome. Isaac, thank you so much for your time. Where can people come find you on the internet, connect, see what you're up to?
I'm on Instagram. This is ceramics, but this _ ceramics. Also, this is photography 2020 is my photography Instagram. My website is isaacspottery.com.
Sweet. All right. We'll link it in the show notes, and I'm going to find your YouTube and link that because I'm just going to go on record. I don't cry in public, man. And I got no words. It's an incredibly powerful presentation. I hope everybody goes and watches it. That's the best words I can possibly do. It's not even doing it justice. I'm stumbling. I keep coming back to something Isaac just said at the end here. However you get success is how you're going to maintain it. I know for myself personally, I often feel like I need to do all of the things. And hearing Isaac say this, however you get success is how you're going to maintain it, is really striking a chord for me. I think a lot of us, obviously myself included, assume that the crazy rush and hustle will only be for a period of time, until we just get to whatever that next goal is. I promise. Then I'll slow down. Then we'll take a break. But if we listen to Isaac's words, if we're honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, we all know we don't often take that break. Because when we do reach whatever it is that we envision to be next, whenever we accomplish that goal, well, we've already set the next round of goals for the next thing we want to achieve. And we promise we only just have to hustle for this period of time to get to that next spot. However you get success is how you're going to maintain it. I definitely don't have the answers for myself on this yet, so frankly, I have no way to wrap up this episode with a nice, concise ending and solution for all of you. But I do know I'm going to be sitting with this idea for a while. In fact, I should probably just print it out and put it in front of me. However you get success is how you're going to maintain it. If you're also continuing to contemplate over what Isaac and I discussed here, we would love to hear from you. Share this episode on Instagram and tag me at The Maker's Playbook and Isaac at this_is_ceramics so we can send you our thanks. Also, if you've been enjoying the podcast for a while now, I would so appreciate it if you took just a minute to wipe the mud off your hands and leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast app you use to listen. I actually only recently just realized that if you listen on Spotify, you need to tap the About text right in between where it says episodes and more like this in order to then tap into the tiny little star icon and leave a review. In Apple Podcasts, it's a little bit more obvious when you scroll down in the list of episodes from this specific show, and then there's a section that in larger text says ratings and reviews, and you can tap into there and leave a review. Either way, both are a little bit more annoying than I would love, but at the same time, they do help other makers find these conversations. So I super, super appreciate you taking the time to do all of that. Once again, this episode was made possible in part thanks to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of The Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.